Good morning. I'm very happy to be here in Hong Kong. I'm actually, we've been in China for a few days, and I was very happy yesterday to actually see the sun come out. We were having a little withdrawal in our group. I'd like to talk a little bit today, provide an update on toy safety in the U.S. By way of an outline, I'm going to discuss our recent injury data associated with toys, some of the regulations and requirements, a quick overview, some of the revisions to the mandatory toy standard, our third-party testing requirements and our laboratory accreditation program, and last but not least, our recent changes to our testing and certification rules. So if we look at toy-related deaths in the U.S. from 2008 to 2010, we see a similar trend. In the year 2010, we had 17 deaths associated with toys. And as the chairman pointed out, the importance of small parts, the majority of these deaths were related to balloons, small balls, and game accessories. So I think as you can see from the death data here that we pay close attention to those requirements. And later on in the presentation, I'll highlight some of those requirements. If we take a look at the injury estimates in the United States, for calendar year 2010, we had over 250,000 estimated injuries, toy-related emergency department treated injuries. This is not a statistically significant change, as my statisticians will tell me, and I'm sure that means a lot for some folks here. What we find pretty consistently on the injury side of things is that riding toys are associated with more of the emergency department treated injuries than any other toy category. And then within that category, the non-motorized scooters account for the majority of the injuries. On the good side of things, the majority of these injuries, 97%, are treated and released the same day. So they're not long hospitalizations that result from these. This is kind of a chart that shows from 96 to 2010 the numbers of injuries. We've had a steady increase in injuries over that time period. And if you can see those two peaks in the middle, those really are related to a spike in injuries that we saw from 1999 to 2002 on non-motorized scooters. We had quite a few come in the market. They were very popular during that time period and resulted in an increase in our injuries. So let me go right into our toy regulations. I'm going to touch on our age grading, our requirements under the Federal Hazardous Substance Act. I'm going to dig in a little deeper on some of the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act requirements, and last but not least, the mandatory toy standard, ASTM F963. So the foundation of the requirements for the U.S. Toy market really lies in the age grading. The age grading is important because it matches the toy to the capabilities of the child. It's used to determine what requirements and what test your product must comply with. There's 4 factors that the Commission considers when they're looking at an age grading. The first, the manufacturer's labeling on the product, and that is if it is reasonable. So I want to highlight that point. Second, whether the product is advertised, promoted, and marketed for that age of child. Third, whether the product is recognized commonly by consumers as being intended for that age child. And last but not least, our age determination guidelines dated 2002. And those guidelines are accessible on our website. So once you get the age graded of the product, there's several key mandatory standards that have been around for a number of years. Right up top, small parts, as our death data showed you, there's a definite reason why we find that an important requirement. Children get those small parts and choke and die on them. Our labeling requirements, art material requirements, lead and paint, 1303, that's been around for a number of years. Electric operated toys, our sharp edge and sharp points requirements, And last but not least, the mandatory toy standard. So now I'd like to highlight a few of the changes in the toy area under the Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act of 2008. The big change was the definition of a children's product, which kicked in new key requirements. And that was that they are designed or intended primarily for children 12 years and older and younger. Some of the key substantive requirements that were initiated there were the lead content in accessible component parts, and as of August of last year, that limit for the majority of children's products is at 100 parts per million. Lead in paint and surface coatings down to 90 parts per million. A ban on 6 phthalates down to 0.1% for toys and child care articles, and the mandatory requirements for the previously voluntary standard ASTM F963. One of the key process changes from that is once you have a children's product designated, is the requirement to actually issue a certificate based on a test by a CPSC accepted third-party lab. Those conformity certificates are issued by the importer and the manufacturer. In addition, we also added tracking labels to better identify the products in case of a recall. It also initiated new safety rules for durable infant nursery products, which we are in the process of completing. Cribs, infant walkers, bath seats, toddler beds, and a number of other items are in the process there. And also the addition of product registration cards was a new key feature. Also created a public database that we launched March of last year. I think the last numbers that I saw, we were around 5,000 reports. Anybody in the world can get on there and see injury reports, and manufacturer has the ability to comment on the reports there, so you can see it right from here. As the chairman mentioned, the stay of enforcement that we had previously on toys, banned phthalates and lead content, that expired in December 31st. So every shipment should be coming in with a certificate based on a test by one of our recognized labs to those requirements at this point. And those are the highlights. A few additional requirements under CPSIA. Under Section 101, the lead paint rule. We also mentioned the certification, third-party testing, tracking labels, labeling requirements, additional requirements there, 963 and the phthalates. Let's talk a little bit about certification. I think it's an important distinction here for us, so that when we see a certificate, the person that certifies on a domestic product is the manufacturer. For an imported product, it is the importer that must certify. And again, if it's a children's product, it's based on a third-party test by one of our accredited labs. If it's a non-children's product, it's based on a first-party test or a reasonable testing program. More requirements. Again, as the data shows, we're very concerned about small parts for children. So a small parts test are required for toys intended for children 3 years and younger. The toys is subject to use and abuse testing based on the intended age grading. And again, the issuing of a certificate based on that. Tracking labels, this is an important requirement that started in August of 2009. They're required on the package and on the product where practicable. That includes the location, date of production. I love this word, cohort information. Everyone should love that one. Maybe that didn't translate as funny, but batch and run number, and identifying marks by the manufacturer. And the whole purpose of the tracking label, again, is if you run into a problem in your production, we end up having to recall it, a way that you can quickly identify the product and get it out of consumers' hands. I mean, that's really the end point there. 963, the mandatory toy standard, became in effect in February of 2009. We adopted the Commission adopted the 2008 revision in August of 2009, but as the Commission has the ability, it can accept in whole or in part any update to the standard. In the update from the 2007 version to the 2008, there was a removal of a toy box provision, and the Commission did not accept that. They found that was not in the interest of safety. I won't go into all these requirements, but as you probably are well aware of, 963 has requirements for many different types of toys. Not all sections of those toys apply to every toy. There are some generic sections that do, but this is kind of a list of some of those. Yeah, like I said, not all sections apply. Some sections require third-party testing. Some sections do not require third-party testing. It covers sections under existing regulations also that we have had in place for years. So let's talk about what sections don't require testing. Sections that are purely a labeling or instructional literature, or producers' marks, or they involve an assessment that is conducted by an unaided eye or without any tool. Those do not require third-party testing. It doesn't mean you can't have a third party do the work, but the Commission will not require third-party testing on that. And also sections about manufacturing processes, quality kind of things that are assessment. Also, for our purposes, sections that address food and cosmetics, those are outside of our jurisdiction, so they do not necessarily require third-party testing to meet our requirements. But it's probably a good idea to make sure you're meeting those. The requirements to test and certify were issued through a notice of requirement, and again, that's the kicker that required the third-party testing. Notable sections there. Again, we kept the toy chest portions in the standard. Also, there's additional sections in there on the soluble limits. So let's talk about what's new. December 15th of 2011, ASTM revised the standard from the 08 version to a 2011 version, and they submitted that to the Commission. In there are some new requirements for heavy metal limits for toy substrates. So they previously had surface coating requirements, and now there are new requirements in there for toy substrates. There's also compositing procedures for total heavy metals analysis, some revisions on the bath toy provisions, and a few more on jaw entrapment, toys with spherical ends, stability of ride-on toys, squeeze toys and rings, cords, straps, elastic packaging film, and yo-yo tether balls. So a lot of folks are probably asking, well, when do I have to comply with this new standard? The law allows the Commission 90 days from the date it's notified to reject in whole or in part the revised standard if it doesn't improve safety. So that, if the Commission so decided, that would happen in March. If I was a betting person, I would bet that the Commission would accept these standards. We have technical folks on these committees that are, again, involved in all of these changes throughout. We've been very happy with the progress of the voluntary standards committees in addressing some of these hazards. So I would not gamble on it not being accepted. And if the Commission accepts the standard, it will become effective 180 days. So you will have to comply with that, and that'll be around June of 2012. So what about testing? So do I have to test and certify in June, or do I just have to comply? The answer is you will have to continue to test and certify to those things that didn't change. So existing requirements. They became required in January. You're going to have to continue to test to those. Any of the new requirements that came in, especially some of those requirements on the heavy metals, the Commission will issue a notice of requirements that will specify when testing will be required for that. And that should happen within this period between now and June, so that folks know clearly, what will be required to test. I'd like to talk a little bit now about some recent amendments to the law, to the CPSIA that happened in August of this year. It was, as the chairman pointed out, it was targeted to provide some targeted regulatory relief for businesses, but also to maintain all the safety requirements from the CPSIA. Basically, dealing with lead content, it allowed the prospective application of lead content rules, which was a big improvement. It added some accessibility limits on phthalates. It changed some requirements on third-party testing, small batch, and some others. I'll dig in these a little deeper here. So, like we said, prospective application on lead content for the 100 ppm was one of the key features out of that. It exempted the ATVs, the ROVs, and the snowmobiles from testing and certifying to the lead exemptions, which was a big point of contention for many of those industries. It also exempted charitable donated products, but with some limited exceptions there on children's jewelry, or if the seller knows that has actual knowledge about the lead content. It also provided an exemption for the bicycle manufacturers so that they limited their lead content to 300 parts per million. It also provided an exemption process for those manufacturers that felt like they could not meet these requirements, if they were not practical or technologically feasible, but also that the product was not likely to be mouthed or ingested, taking into account normal use and abuse, so the exposure route, and also that there would be no measurable health impact to that exposure. If a group is interested in seeking an exemption, there's a process that they apply to us, and we review that and make the recommendations. On the phthalates front, a big change here was the inaccessible parts. So what happened? There was an inaccessibility option on the lead side. We didn't have the same thing on the phthalates, so Congress corrected that through this process that now allows this concept of inaccessibility to be in effect. On the third-party testing front, it excluded third-party testing for books and ordinary paper-based printed materials. Some restrictions there, again, are on books that are have an inherent play value or design intended for children 3 years and younger. Again, that's trying to get at the issue of the mouthing exposure that we see in younger children like that. Also, it provided metal component parts for bicycles of lead content not to have to do third-party testing. We have out here now, for public comment, Congress asked us to seek comment on new ways to try to reduce third-party testing costs. They realized the balancing act there of the cost associated with third-party testing and the safety. So we have a notice of or a request for comment out on that. It's the questions that we're asking about are about the use of component parts, similar products, and also to what extent that we could use other national or international standards to assure conformity with U.S. product safety laws. So I would encourage folks that are interested in that and providing comment. The comment period closes January 23rd. We also, again, we're going to look at alternate testing technologies if they exist that would lower testing costs and any of those techniques. As the chairman mentioned too, there was an attempt to reduce cost to small batch manufacturers, amendments that provided relief of third-party testing to some, but not all, products. And again, those are manufacturers had no more than $1 million gross revenue and 7,500 products in a calendar year. It required registration to get that relief, and we've since put up a registration system, as the chairman mentioned. And the commission can look at alternate test methods, or if they don't find those, we can exempt them outright. At this point, the way the law was written, if the small batch manufacturers was given the exemption until commission action. However, there was no exemption on lead paint, full-size cribs, non-full-size cribs, pacifiers, small parts, children's metal jewelry, bouncers, walkers, and jumpers, and durable nursery products. So it's a limited exemption from the testing and certification requirements. Some other amendments that were recently put in there, again, providing us the ability to update our standards similar to that we had in the toy rule. Those were added. Those were very helpful. Some exemptions on tracking labels that we were seeking. Some requirements for us to seek model and serial number for products for our public database, which we have already put into place, and also for us to complete the ATV mandatory rule in 2012. Let's talk a little bit about testing and certification requirements, the periodic testing and component part rule. The key here is, again, identifying an accredited lab that CPSC recognizes. We have a web page here where you can actually look up. Again, you're not required to do all tests, and you can use different labs for different tests. There may be an advantage to using one lab that can do multiple tests for you. But again, I would encourage you to search our website for a list of labs that we recognize. And just a breakdown of the numbers of toy labs that we have accredited so far. We have 134 labs accredited, but as you can see, the majority of them in China, Hong Kong, and the United States.